Hi, second grade. Welcome to reading lesson 8. We've been having a great journey through traditional tales, first by reading through the different fairy tales, and then beginning to read about folk tales. In folk tales, we learned that sometimes animals can act like people. Well, in some cultures, animals in nature are used to teach lessons or morals. Today we're going to be reading those kinds of folk tales. Folk tales that use animals who talk and think just like we do, and they teach us lessons. Our goal today is I can use the results of a character's actions to teach a moral. Let's get started. Today we're going to read the story How Chipmunk Got His Stripes. You can find this story on page 300 in your Journeys textbook. So if you have your Journeys book at home, go ahead and find it. You can pause the video until you're ready. If not, you can go ahead and read on the screen with me. As we read, there's going to be some times I stop and ask you to help me read the characters. Are you ready? Let's read How Chipmunk Got His Stripes. Bear turned west to face the sun. It was a time when the sun always goes down. Bear stood up to his full height and spoke in a loud voice. "Sun, do not come up tomorrow." At his words, the sun began to disappear behind the hills. "You see," Bear said, "Sun is afraid of me. He is running away." "But will the sun come up tomorrow?" Brown Squirrel asked. "No," Bear answered. "The sun will not come up." Bear turned to face east, the direction where the sun always used to come up. He sat down. Little Brown Squirrel sat down beside him. All that night they did not sleep. All that night Bear kept saying these words. I'm going to ask you to read these words with me. It says, "The sun will not come up, humph." Only I want you to say them like a bear would, like this. "The sun will not come up." Are you ready? Do it with me. "The sun will not come up, humph. The sun will not come up, humph." But as the night went on, Little Brown Squirrel began to say something too. He said these words. Now the next words I want you to read in a squirrel voice, like this. "The sun is going to rise, ooh." Are you ready? Here we go. "The sun is going to rise, ooh. The sun is going to rise, ooh." Good job. All through the night they sat there. One by one, other animals gathered around the room. Fox and wolf, deer and moose, rabbit and porcupine, hawk and owl, otter and beaver, frog and turtle. Even the little mice came. They wanted to see who would be right, Bear or Brown Squirrel. This is what the other animals heard. All right, use your bear and your squirrel voice and read with me. "The sun will not come up. The sun is going to rise, ooh." "The sun will not come up. The sun is going to rise, ooh." Just before I need to read this, start this whole page over again. Finally, it was just before dawn, the time when the sun always used to come up. "Look," said Turtle, "a bit of red is starting to show." "Yes," said Owl, "I believe the sun will rise today." Ready? Get ready. Bear only chanted louder. Be your bear. "The sun will not come up, humph." But right next to him, Little Brown Squirrel piped up. In your squirrel voice, read it. "The sun is going to rise, ooh." And the sun came up. The birds sang their welcoming song. The bright light of the new day spread over the land. Everyone was happy, except for one animal. That animal was Bear. He sat there with his head down and a grumpy look on his face. Put a grumpy look on your face. The happiest animal of all was Little Brown Squirrel. "The sun came up," he chirped. "The sun came up, the sun came up, the sun came up." Ready? Do that with me. Ready? "The sun came up, the sun came up, the sun came up." Good job. Brown Squirrel was so happy, he forgot what his wise old grandmother had told him when he was very young. "Brown Squirrel," his grandmother had said, "it is good to be right about something, but when someone else is wrong, it is not a good idea to tease him." Now, Little Brown Squirrel began to tease Bear. Bear is foolish, the sun came up. Bear is silly, the sun came up. Bear is stupid, the sun... Whop! Bear's big paw came down on Little Brown Squirrel, pinning him to the ground. Bear leaned over and opened his huge mouth. Yes, Bear growled. The sun did come up. Yes, I do look foolish, but you will not live to see another sunrise. You will not ever tease anyone else again because I, Bear, am going to eat you. Big Brown Squirrel thought fast. You are right to eat me, he said. I was wrong to tease you. I would like to say I am sorry before you eat me, but you are pressing down on me so hard that I cannot say anything. I cannot say anything at all. I cannot even breathe. If you would just lift up your paw a little bit, then I could take a deep breath and apologize before you eat me. That is a good idea, Bear said. I would like to hear you apologize before I eat you. So Bear lifted up his paw, but instead of apologizing, Brown Squirrel ran. He ran as fast as he could toward the pile of stones where he had his home. He had a tunnel under those stones and a nice warm burrow underground. Little Brown Squirrel's grandmother stood there in the door waiting for him. Hurry, Brown Squirrel, she called. Hurry, hurry. Little Brown Squirrel dove for the door to his home, but Bear was faster than he looked. He grabbed for Little Brown Squirrel with his big paw. Bear's long, sharp claws scratched Brown Squirrel's back from the top of his head to the tip of his tail. But Brown Squirrel got away. Deep down in his burrow, where Bear couldn't get to him, Brown Squirrel curled up next to his grandmother and slept all winter while those scratches on his back healed. When spring came again, Little Brown Squirrel came out of his hole and looked at himself. There were long, pale stripes all the way down his back, where Bear had scratched him. He was Brown Squirrel no longer. He was now Chipmunk, the striped one. That is how Chipmunk got his stripes. Ever since then, Chipmunk has been the first animal to get up every morning. As the sun rises, he scoots to the tallest tree to sing his song. The sun came up, the sun came up, the sun came up, the sun came up. Can you do that with me? Here we go. The sun came up, the sun came up, the sun came up, the sun came up. And ever since then, Bear has been the last animal to get up. He doesn't like to hear Chipmunk's song. It reminds him, as it reminds us all, that no one, not even Bear, can do everything. Second grade, you know that stories teach us lessons. We've been talking about how authors often want us to learn something from the stories they write. Another word for the word lesson is the word moral. A moral is a lesson learned from a story or an experience. So if you see the word moral, just know it's what the author wants us to learn from a story. You already learned that you can look at the problem and solution and ask, what can I learn about being a better person? That's one way you can find the moral or the lesson. Today we're going to talk about another way. We're going to talk about a character's action. The way that the character acts in a story can teach us a lesson about how to live. When we do this work, we ask ourselves these questions. Who is the character? We have to know which character we're thinking about. What did they do? It can't just be any old action. It has to be a really important action. Then we can ask, what was the result? So what happened because of the action they took? And finally, what does that teach me? We think about their action and then what happened because of their actions, and then we ask ourselves what that can teach us. That's the moral of the story. To do this work and keep track of my thoughts, in my reader's notebook, I want to make a 4-square chart by drawing one line down and one line across. In the first box, I'm going to label it character. That's where I'm going to answer the question, who is the character? The next box I label action. That's where I can write down what that character does at the beginning of the story. Then I can write down the word result. That's where I can write down the results of the action or what happened because of it. And then finally, I write the word moral. This is where I answer the question, what does that teach me? And I put down the moral of the story. So I want to think about a character from How Chipmunk Got His Stripes. I'm going to think about the character Bear. So who is the character? The character is Bear. I write that in the first box. Then I think, what did they do? So what did Bear do? Well, an important thing Bear did at the beginning was he bragged that the sun was not going to come up. I'm going to write that under action. He bragged about stopping the sun, right? Then I ask myself, what was the result? So he bragged that he was going to stop the sun. But what happened? The sun came up anyway, didn't it? That was the result. He said he was going to stop the sun, but the sun came up anyway. Now is the important part, the part that it's going to help me understand the moral. What does that teach me? Well, I have a character who bragged about doing something that was impossible and that it didn't work, did it? It made him look really silly or really foolish. So I can learn from that I should probably not say foolish things. The moral of this story is bragging can lead to feeling foolish. I probably shouldn't brag or say I can do things I can't do because it's going to make me look foolish. Do you see how I thought about who the character was? I thought about one of the actions they took and the results of that action, and then thought, what does that teach me? That was the moral, one of the morals of that story. The story How Chipmunk Got His Stripes actually can have 2 morals in it. Let's do the work with the character Brown Squirrel. On the next Nearpod slide, you're going to have this Draw It slide. I want you to think about Brown Squirrel. I want you to think, what is an action that he took? What was the results of that action? And what can you learn from that? Fill in the 4 square to show the action, the results of the action, and the moral that we can learn from the character Brown Squirrel. Then go to the next Nearpod slide to see if you're right.